Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the February 17th, 2026 Committee of the Whole meeting. I'm Deputy Mayor Stephen Van Newkirk, and we should have a fairly robust but quick meeting tonight, I think. Everything is quite well presented, and we're going to get lots of data tonight. So with that, I'll call the meeting to order and speak to the land acknowledgement. The City of Beaumont respects the histories, languages, and cultures of all First Peoples of this land, whether they be of First Nation, Métis, or Inuit descent, and appreciates that their presence continues to enrich vibrant communities across the land. As we gather here in Treaty 6 territory in the homeland of the Métis Nation, we acknowledge that we are all treaty people and have ongoing responsibilities to protect and honor the treaty, the inherent rights of the people and the land. Thank you. With that, I'll look to the adoption of the agenda. Clerk, do we have any amendments to the agenda this evening?
Good evening. We do have one amendment to the agenda.
Okay, we'll wait for... Okay, thank you. Do I have a committee member willing to move this motion? Councillor Natellenboss.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I move that the February 17, 2026 Committee of the Whole meeting agenda be adopted as amended. Item 5.1, Festival and Event Strategy Engagement Update Attachment 1 presentation by Orange Crow leadership has been updated and replaced in its entirety.
Thank you for that. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, we'll call the question. Thanks for the responses, everyone. That carries unanimously 7-0. So we'll watch for the updated piece to come through to council, and then we'll be able to see that in real time. So everyone just watch your emails for the update there. Next on the agenda is the adoption of the minutes from Committee of the Whole, January 20th, 2026. Do I have a committee member willing to move the motion to adopt these minutes? Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I move that the January 20th, 2026 Committee of the Whole meeting minutes be adopted as presented.
Thank you. Any discussion on that motion from anyone? Seeing none, we'll call the question on this one. Thank you all for your responses. That carries 7-0. Carries unanimously. Brings us to the open forum session on the agenda for the open forum tonight.
No, we have no one registered.
Okay, thank you very much. Which brings us on to number 5, presentations and delegations. And 5.1, we will hear about the festival and event strategy engagement update. And our presenters are in person tonight. Thank you for coming. And if you hit the button, I'll turn your mic on. Great, and I'll pass it over to you. Thank you.
Sure. Good evening, committee. I'm Amanda Cuthbert, Manager of Recreation and Culture. This evening, I have a report on engagement findings of the Festival and Event Strategy. I'd like to introduce you to our consultant, Tim Reed from Orange Crow Leadership. I'd like to share a little bit of an overview of how we've got here, and then I'll pass it on to Tim to go through the engagement report. In 2023, Council approved the decision to sunset the Community Events Committee. Responsibility for higher level event matters shifted to the Recreation and Culture Advisory Committee. The committee acknowledges that the city's growing investment in community events, while also recognizing the absence of an overall framework to guide decision-making when it came to events. The committee made a recommendation to council to develop a strategy that would include opportunities for new events, ways to enhance existing events, options to improve diversity inclusion within the city's event offerings. Council approved the funding for the festival and event strategy development through the 2025 operating budget. Orange Crow leadership was selected and began working on the strategy in August of 2025. Engagement completed to date includes internal engagement with city administration, in-person sessions with community volunteer organizations and event organizers, in-person engagement with members of the Youth Committee, the Recreation and Culture Advisory Committee, the Grant Committee, and the Arts Committee. A public online survey was also available and received more than 430 responses. This evening, Tim has a presentation to share the engagement findings, answer any questions, and collect your feedback. I will pass it off to Tim.
Well, thanks very much for the opportunity to be here. to Mayor and Council. It has been a wonderful experience working with your team. I want to highlight that because they have been incredibly open and accessible, and I think forthcoming with any information that they had to offer. Want to recognize Amanda and her team, who have been participating really on every one of our bi-weekly calls and active in our open stakeholder communications that often happened on the evenings and weekends. What I will say is we had a goal of achieving 362 responses for a reliable survey count. We achieved that goal. I want to recognize the marketing and communications team. One element of our intended engagement was the Brighten Up Beaumont Festival, which obviously due to weather, similar to today actually, I think was the last time we tried to talk about engagement, didn't necessarily happen the way we'd hoped. But I do want to recognize More Blessing for her leadership in achieving that target, which isn't always easy when you don't have people coming to an event. What I can say is that our engagement process followed the IAP2 highest standards, and it is a reliable survey based on 95% accuracy. What that means is if you ask your friends and neighbors, they should give you essentially the same answers as you're seeing today, and it should be a fairly collective survey for the community as a large. See if this works now. Oh, it does. There is one amendment to the package just based on some feedback forward. I think our hope is to provide an update in advance of you receiving the final report. I think we're on track for the final report and we should be within the timelines delivered. I don't think it should be a surprise to you that as your community grows, so do your public gatherings and festivals. I think one of the takeaways that we received through your public engagement was people truly do value coming together in your community. But they're coming together in bigger numbers than they have in the past because frankly, you're a bigger community. That puts strain on event organizers. It puts strain on your spaces, but there is even more desire for your community to come together, which I think is highlighted hopefully in this presentation. We highlighted a number of the stakeholders that we met with. Most of them we had the opportunity to meet with in person, and we want to recognize them for gifting us their time, but also their energy. What we will say is the vast majority of the groups that we met with were very interested in this process, willing to share, and I think very transparent with some of the opportunities and the challenges that they're experiencing in their not-for-profit organizations or their volunteer groups. We felt that the feedback was honest. We thought that the conversation was engaged. And most importantly, I think they were appreciative of the opportunity to share a little bit about their organization with our team and the city. This is the What We Heard report. And so we're going to highlight some of the high-level ones. We'll put some content to it, and obviously more than welcome to receive any questions. One of the pieces that we took from the engagement process was much of your infrastructure is really multi-purpose, or a common space really designed for the purpose of large festivals and large public gatherings. Your host event owners or your delivery agents is that the space through creativity gets converted from something that may not be its intended form, but they find a way to make it work. They work closely with your city, and your city gives them an incredible amount of their time and their energy to ensure these events are delivered well. But the infrastructure that you have today have some gaps, which will continue to find strains as you continue to grow as a community. And frankly, your festivals are more well-received and increase in attendance. From a venue suitability standpoint, there's some opportunities, but there is also risks. One of the pieces that we want to highlight with you is there is risk around how you access your venues. What happens in this scenario where there's an emergency? It's unfortunate that we see this more and more often on a global scale, but the truth of the matter is when we come together, it's not always good things that do happen. And unfortunately, we do have to be prepared for the worst. So the understandings of how potential risks or emergency circumstances would happen at a venue, how you move people in and out in a safe fashion, is probably one of the key themes that you will see from us as you've seen from the public. There is a need for multi-purpose facilities in future venue development. One of the pieces we heard from your stakeholders was the fact that a lot of the amenities you have today, although wonderful as a park space or a recreational amenity, they didn't necessarily have the plan at the time for receiving public gatherings or concerts or entertainment or festivals or cultural gatherings. What that means is it's not necessarily the easiest to convert those spaces. It's often costly for an event organizer to be able to bring in the right equipment. And so as you plan for the future, or when you consider neighborhoods or you consider facilities, recognize that there is an opportunity to bring your community together in those spaces, and they would appreciate that. One piece that we heard from every stakeholder was the desire to be inclusive and accessible. And overall, there's some really strong data points that we were able to receive from your community. However, there was a sense that we can always be better. Not all of our spaces, when we're not using purpose-built facilities, allow for ease of access and ease of accessibility. It was top of mind for all of your stakeholders. There was an element around coordination and communication. I think one of the opportunities for you as a city is to continue to take a leadership role in how you share the message of not only your event organizations, but also those that you partner with and those that are independent. One of the pieces of information that we heard is there are valuable tools in place, but perhaps not being accessed by everybody, and for many, they're just not aware. I don't think this will come as a surprise, but many of your organizations that do such wonderful work in your community are volunteer-based. And they do this outside of their day jobs, much like some folks in this room. But volunteers are becoming an increasingly difficult commodity in every community in Canada, but it is also in yours. We heard often that the extras or the festivals or the cultural gatherings were over and above what many of your not-for-profit entities do today. And so although they may be delivering a service, whatever that service is, the extra events and the festivals are just putting a strain on their volunteer base, which is significantly challenged today. There was strong messaging around funding, sustainability, and stability. Many of your groups plan multi-year festivals or multi-year events, and it depended upon the grant processes that you have. Clarity in that process, certainty in future planning would go a long way. Certainly there was a strong message of you're experiencing in your own events, the cost isn't getting any less burdensome for your not-for-profits. And when you look at the data, there is great value in free or affordable coming from the public. And so what we did here is any ability to refine the application process, but also provide clarity on multi-year funding opportunities would be valued by your stakeholders. One of the pieces that many of your stakeholders that we had the opportunity to meet with identified is they really love your small town charm, but find themselves being part of a city, and a big city that's actually growing on the outskirts of the city of Edmonton. And so trying to find a balance between what we've always been versus what we need to become in the future was something they were wrestling with in a positive way, because I think they acknowledged that change is happening. But there was discomfort in the fact that what was once a small town gathering or a small town festival all of a sudden has thousands of people instead of hundreds, and that's putting different pressures on their gatherings. There was a piece around data reporting and performance measurements. I think all of the groups recognized that if we could land on some common themes around data, what we measure, what we report on, and how we present that information, that would be helpful. Not only from a sharing of information, but also understanding how we don't compete with ourselves in a smaller market for volunteers, for event space, and for dollars. And the last piece, and once again, I think this is the element that we'll stress with council, is there's an element around emergency management, safety, and liability. This is the component where I think you as a city have an opportunity to perhaps grow into your next chapter of a rapidly growing city. But what we did recognize is, although ERP, emergency response plans are in place, they're not always where you need them to be. And if you had to act upon them, there would be significant risk for everybody involved. The ability to ensure that there's clear structure in who makes final decisions in a situation of emergency, and aligning between your festival and events rights holders, your emergency preparedness teams, and your community side of your operations. This is the piece that I'm just going to leave with you, because it will be a common theme. If there is an opportunity of which you have many, it is the opportunity to make sure that as your festivals and your gatherings get bigger and bigger, that you ensure that everybody is safe. I think you've got a wonderful track record, and it's because of the hard work of many of your event organizers, and I first think your emergency preparedness team, But as your events become more complex and grow in intensity and frankly activation, the risk grows with it. This is probably one of those elements that to a council, I think would be at the top of a priority list as you move forward. So overall, we received 436 responses. The average response time was 5 minutes, and the survey was open from December the 12th until January the 26th. We felt quite comfortable that the results were consistent. There wasn't massive spikes throughout the period. It was fairly consistent as advertising would happen, or frankly, as events would come together. There was 156 comments that were received, and most of them have been included, and certainly in our full report, you'll have access to all of them. We'll move relatively quickly through this, and we'll just speak to some highlights. I think overall what we heard from your community was the vast majority of the folks that wanted to participate in this discussion had lived here for 10 years. So they knew your community, they knew your events, they knew your festivals and your gathering. That 6 to 10 years space is where the vast majority of folks that participated, as well as recognizing that some folks that have been in your community for 1 to 5 years decided they wanted to participate in this conversation. But overall, those that are longtime residents were those that participated in this survey. From an age range, I think overall what we recognize through this is we continue to struggle to be able to access the younger participants. You are a very young community with a very large percentage of your population sitting in that 15 age group and below. Obviously a great family community. Vast majority of our responses were in that 35 to 44 group and the 45 to 54 group. Both of those would have been overstated if you compare it to your StatsCan data, but those were the folks that participated. And so taking that with a bit of a grain of salt, because it will influence some of the answers that you see in later components to it. I think the team did a strong job of accessing the groups of 55 to 65 plus, relatively similar to your sample or your StatsCan results. But that big block of orange and yellow that you see is overstated based on your population demographics. This is another slide that I think is important because it ties into some of the other questions that we asked. The vast majority of the folks that responded were in the 100 plus annual salary position from a household standpoint. And so it does suggest that those that responded had disposable funds, had available income to participate, and we may not be representing everybody that were in some of those lower income brackets, perhaps as strong. The median household income for the city of Beaumont is $130,000 according to StatsCan 2024 results. And so if you highlight that versus our results, yes, we captured that group, but we're probably on the higher end of that bucket. How would you describe your cultural or ethnic background? I think this is also an area where we had really strong responses from one primary group. Now that being said, within the community, 83% according to the last StatsCan results in 2024 suggest that 83% of the community are non-visible minorities, with 17% being visible minorities. Obviously, the vast majority of those that participated in the survey identified as white or European descent, which would sway some of the outcomes. I will highlight that we worked fairly hard to make sure that we engaged some of our vulnerable populations and non-visible minorities at events. We advertised to specific areas, we attended specific functions. We just didn't see the uptake that perhaps we would have liked to. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's not representative of the community, but it may not be representative of where the community is going in the future. How often do you attend festivals? I think overall this is a strong recognition of the work that you do within the festivals and event space. You know, almost 80% of those that responded attend your festivals kind of 2 to 5 times. And so they're active users of that space. They're going to events so they have a sense of what it will be. Which of the following City of Beaumont events have you attended? I would assume this isn't a surprise to those of you that go to those events regularly, but obviously your Beaumont Days is your flagship property. Canada Day falls just slightly below that, and Brighten Up Beaumont isn't that far behind. And so if you were going to say these are your 3 lead properties, obviously Beaumont Days, Canada Days, and Brighten Up Beaumont are very important. Family Day, Remembrance Day are all included in that, but certainly Beaumont Days is the one that your community celebrates probably the most. This is one of the questions that we added a little bit of data, so if you were working off the original bar graphs that were a little bit more complicated, I'm not sure that this one's any better, so we're certainly happy to share all the detail if you'd like it. But I think this is one of those questions of, if you've attended a City of Beaumont event, how would you rate the experience? Obviously, this is sentiment-based. Probably worth leaning towards the extremities in this, so who said we're doing really well or who said we're not doing so well. On the highlight standpoint, I think overall, real positive feedback on the quality of the entertainment, really positive feedback on the value for money. The one that probably highlights as the most critical of performance, and even then I say it's quite positive, is parking and transportation. This really flowed through the public comments as well as, you know what, we're just getting full, was the overall tone. And so, you know, 50% of your users essentially park and ride, or sorry, park, drive and then park, and 50% find an alternative means. But as your events become more and more well attended, this problem will only continue to grow in the future. Component around accessibility is worth noting, just that 55% of folks said, hey, this really doesn't apply to us. Probably coming at it from a person that's saying, do I have accessibility challenges of accessing space? Worth highlighting, but overall I think this provides you a fairly strong overview of how you do as a city in your festival space. And I think it's a really positive recognition of the hard work of not only your team, but also those that bring these events to life throughout the course of the year. Biggest challenge, obviously, is on the parking side. How do you usually get to events? Oh, sorry. Here's the detail on this if anybody wanted to spend a little more time on it afterwards. How do people usually get to your events? Walk or bike at 48% and drive and park at just under 50%. So really the vast majority of folks, not a lot of people are getting dropped off at your events. They're actually going to drive there and they're going to park, or they're going to take a walking or biking path, which really highlights, I think, an interesting outcome in how people access your space. Credit to you for creating an accessible community where people can walk or bike. That's not always the case, but also you have a lot of people that are looking for a parking spot once they get to your venue, which creates some challenges in neighborhoods and some frustrations that we heard as well. Do you think it's important for the City of Beaumont to look for ways to manage traffic? I think a fairly strong sentiment of, yeah, this is a bit of a challenge. It's not something that is a real hardship right now, but it's a frustration. Obviously, as you continue to grow, where we park and how we access spaces is going to become an increasing challenge for you, I think, going forward in the future. About half the group said, no, it's fairly fine. About half the group said, yeah, it's something we need to think about. Do you think the current events hosted by the City of Beaumont reflect the city's cultural diversity? I think the general sentiment here was certainly leaning towards, you know, somewhat well or very well, a little less so on the, you know, not very well. So overall sentiment in this would be very positive in terms of how you reflect the cultural heritage of the city and the cultural diversity of the city. How important is it to you that the City of Beaumont includes Indigenous cultures and reconciliation in events? Interesting feedback here, you know, where you have about half of your group, 3/4 of your group essentially saying that's either very important or somewhat important, and, you know, a fairly large segment saying, you know, and it doesn't need to be in our spaces today. Recognizing your land acknowledgement off the top and of opening, it's one of those things that keeping in your events is important, and it speaks towards some of the opportunities we have through festivals and events to celebrate reconciliation. What kind of events do you want to see? Overall, top three kind of leading drivers are more music and entertainment. People do seem to have a real excitement around, you know, live music and live gathering, food and drink, and outdoor festivals. There is a component of winter festivals. Obviously, in any winter city, the ability to come together when the days are the longest is always a great opportunity within a community, and certainly large commentary around, we are a very young community, we want things for families and young people to come together. What matters most to you when you go to events? I think this is an important comment because it leads with free or low cost. One of the pieces that in our end report you'll see with quite strength is you do provide incredibly affordable opportunities for people to come together. They're either free or, I would say, very inexpensive compared to alternatives. It's something the community celebrates, but it's becoming more of a challenge for your events rights holders as the price of everything continues to grow up. So that balance between affordability and what things actually cost, I think, is something that's important. People want the opportunity to get together as a family. They want to make sure that it's easy to get ingress and egress and get to and home, and they want to celebrate local business. And so they do. One of the consistent themes in our engagement is that link between how do we drive local business through gathering of people, and I think that is genuinely important to your stakeholders. This is an interesting slide, probably something that you've seen in the past, but essentially everybody wants to engage in a virtual space with you. And so when we said, do you want us to go out to open houses? Do you want us to come to your events? Essentially 90% of everybody said, no, just hit us on social media through surveys and through QR codes. That's how they want to be part of this conversation, or it's what's easiest. You may not see that everywhere. I don't know if that's consistent with what we've seen, but probably recognized in the fact that we did get a large number of survey responses. That seems to be how people want to talk to you. I think we've talked about some of the, we introduced some of the highlight themes, but maybe I'll reiterate it and then we'll open up to questions. When you think about the priorities and things that you as council may want to consider at a strategic level, obviously mobility and parking should be at the top of that list. That is something that your stakeholders are saying, we need to pay attention to this because it's not getting any easier. You are a winter city. There's a desire from your stakeholders to celebrate that, find opportunities to come together in the winter months, but also recognize that we need a backup plan. It's not all the time that the weather is in our favor, as you recognize this year. And when we don't have a backup plan using an indoor space, people look forward to those gatherings, and so have a plan B wherever possible. Crowd size is growing. The attendance at your events is growing, particularly on the ones that are fairly economical community gatherings. As the crowd grows, this creates greater complexity in terms of how you manage crowds. It also comes with a heightened level of risk. When something goes wrong with 100 people, it's a problem. When it goes wrong with 5,000 people, it's a real problem. And so I will leave you with that. We've hopefully left our point on that about how important it is. But in the public gathering space, this is something that we talk about at the biggest levels and the smallest levels, but it is something that you should be talking about as well. An opportunity for team programming. This also broke down into segments. There's times where adults want to get together, there's times where we want to bring their family, but there's also a lack of space for team gatherings in the community that was identified in the festival and event space. And the event experience. Let's make sure that our standard across all events are maintained. So let's make sure that we provide accessibility, washrooms, food and beverage services across all of our events so that the standard is the standard across the city. And then really an opportunity for you as the city to lead in gathering the event calendar and channeling communications between the groups. I think what we recognize through this process is it may not naturally be your seat or your role to do so, but certainly your rights holders and your events holders are looking to you to be the one that brings everybody together so that they can coordinate and collaborate, and there is an opportunity for you. Overall, when you look at your spaces, some of the feedback that we recognized is as you continue to grow your events in large public spaces, this comes with a lot of positivity. It comes with some challenges because you're putting pressure on those spaces or displacing other user groups, but it also comes with impact for those that live in the neighborhoods, impact to wildlife and animals that may be in those areas. There's an element of recognition that the culture is changing within the community, and you should be open to embracing those new cultural gatherings and new groups as they present themselves. The organizing groups may not be the same tomorrow or in 5 years that you have today. And as we search for volunteers and folks willing to put their hands up to be part of delivering festivals and events, we should do our best to embrace those new communities. There was a balance between the concept of more events or fewer events at a higher production value. Truth of the matter is, I think your community has told you they want as many events as you're willing to host, and they would like to continue to have those events at the standard that you've set. And so obviously that'll a challenge and opportunity. I think the general sense is your community really likes what you do, and they like what your third-party operators do. They want you to maintain that, and they want you to grow upon it going forward. Some key recommendations. Develop a long-term plan balancing capacity of your neighborhoods and your winter reliability. This is the idea of your space is getting full. As your community gets bigger, you are going to have to find solutions to receive those spaces. But also in the winter months, how do we find opportunities to get together? Implement an annual mobility management plan. So this is the opportunity of how do we find a way beyond just biking and walking or just driving and parking. There has to be some new solutions because you're running out of space fairly quickly. Create programming streams for teens, adults, and underrepresented groups. But most importantly, when you develop programming, target a specific group and measure the data on how you're achieving that. Formalize your vendor strategies. Obviously, there's a desire to look local first, and I think that's a positive thing for this community, but there's also an opportunity around how do you meet growing events needs with more vendors, because as more people come out, you need more food and beverage and washrooms and supplies. And then the last piece is really adopt an annual communications plan. I think this is an opportunity for you to show real leadership for your community, but also to make sure that they're getting in a room frequently to talk about their events so that we're not competing with ourselves for the same weekend, the same space, the same calendar timelines. I think most of our recommendations we've talked about to the chair. I don't know if you want me to go through these. I think we introed them off the top, and so respecting that it's not the greatest weather, and I'm sure you want to get home, unless anybody wants to go through it. Hopefully you've heard it before, but our recommendations from the stakeholder component are included. Obviously, the full report will also have some other elements relative to your internal data, but this is what we heard from the community. I think it should be representative of what you would hear if you asked your friends and neighbors, and I want to recognize the team that helped us achieve it, and thank you for the opportunity to present today.
Yeah, thank you for that. And like you said, I think if anyone can revisit any or all of those slides. Appreciate the information and the quick rejig of a little bit of the presentation of the numbers. It's always hard, because some of those get a little bit complicated just by nature. So looking to the committee for any comments or questions. Councillor Hyde, you're up.
Yeah, just thanks for the presentation. It was excellent through the chair. A couple things I just wanted to revisit. One was cultural heritage background. When we did the survey, of course, it was over 80% white or European descent. And you said that it was mostly in fitting with our population, basically. But I'm just wondering how many, how you were able to reach out to some of the other Southeast Asian community or anything like that, and was it a cultural thing that they didn't want to give back, or was it just couldn't get them to come forward?
Yeah, through the chair, wonderful question. Although I think to your comment, it's relatively representative of the community dynamics. If you look at 2024 StatsCan, I'm not sure if you looked at the data today, it would be the same, just because your community seems to be changing at such a rapid pace. What we did is we worked with your communications team, and there was actually a couple heritage gatherings, and so we sent the team out, we put up posters, we essentially handed out QR codes, and so I think we tried to do as much as we could, but I would want to be clear with the committee. I think it's a voice that didn't come out as loudly as perhaps it should, and was missing. It wasn't through a lack of effort. I don't know why we didn't see the participation that perhaps we were hoping for, but we didn't.
Could it have been, just a quick question with that, an interpretation type of thing? Could it have come out with a different language, for instance, or something like that was more fitting for that population or something? I don't know if everybody, of course, English is not their second language, their first language, of course, so maybe there's something, I don't know if you guys do that, some translation into Tagalog or whatever, sort of an idea.
Through the chair, I think I don't know that I have an answer for you, but I do think I would agree with the comment that it's a flag going forward. The other piece that I do think correlates to the data is the fact that the vast majority of those that participated in the survey had attended your events. They were longtime citizens or longtime community members, and so the voice that we heard through this were people that had gone to Beaumont Days and wanted to provide feedback. So there may also be a correlation to the fact that maybe if you're new to the community, you hadn't experienced those events yet, or perhaps you didn't have a comment to add. So I think the idea of how you engage is something that to the communications team should be top of mind, because obviously we were underrepresented in that feedback. But I would also say that the feedback we received were from folks that obviously had attended your events and had some history, and they wanted to have a voice.
Excellent. And I just had one more quick question. You had a slide about how people got to the events. I'm wondering if there was ever a question that if there was a bus that was provided during these events, would they take it? And I'm not sure if that was totally stated that way or just how they went. You know, if the city provided a bus that did a route around during Beaumont Days or a couple of our larger events, would they actually take that bus rather than walking or biking or stuff like that? The city is getting bigger; it's not getting smaller. So we have our northern residents now that are a little ways out, and there's no way for them to get through with a path. And then we have our southern residents, which are growing, of course, quite a bit too. So even to the west. So I'm not sure if that was asked succinctly as to if there was a bus that they would take it.
Through the chair, we didn't ask that question, but I do think what you've highlighted is probably the solution. I think the idea of a parking ride strategy or run a bus from various locations, just simply by the geography that you have available and the amount of parking spaces, as your events continue to grow, the walker, bike, or drive and park solution won't be enough. And so I think what you've highlighted is what we've talked to the team about is you likely need to build that strategy and have it scalable so that so that you're not providing too much service, but at the same time as your community grows. So we did not ask that question, but I think the solution that you've highlighted is probably one that it's where you need to go because you're running out of parking spots and not everybody can bike or walk.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Miller, followed by Mayor Lisa, followed by Councillor Penrod. I'm just going to slide one quick comment in ahead here, and that's just around planned versus casual attendees. That question wasn't asked, but just in your summation, would most people have planned to come to these events, or did they happen upon them? Or is there work to be done there to figure that out a bit?
Wonderful question, and just to the chair, I think the vast majority of those that responded to the survey were folks that attended your three big events.
So they knew they were going on and they were going.
And I think, although I've never attended Beaumont Days, I think it's a bit of a rite of passage in the community, right? Like I think, it's like when the fair comes to town or, whatever that annual event is in your community, I think everybody goes. And so I would suggest that most of those that responded to the survey would have been planned. One of the pieces that we did hear around collaboration and communication was there is an opportunity for you to heighten the accessibility of your events calendar. So make that the events calendar that has everything. Yep. So if you're looking for what to do in Beaumont this weekend, you go to the events calendar. Yep. And so, I think people were planned, but with better communication and frankly, better collaboration of your gathering entities, you'd probably see more unplanned attendance. Last comment to that is really easy to understand planned attendance when you're ticketing an event, less easy to do it when it's free. And so part of what we talked about with the team is even if it's a free event, we still need to capture the data on how many people are coming because it will help you plan.
Yeah, and the other piece of the casual is it's casually accessed as well.
Yeah.
There's no gate per se.
100%.
Councillor Murray.
Thank you. Thanks so much for your presentation. I had a similar question to Councillor Hyde in terms of actually this transportation, because it sounds like it would, like as you said, sort of split down the middle between like driving and parking or, walking and riding your bike or whatever. And then also I believe the next slide, it talks about whether there was a concern about parking. Were those tracked as the same people that were walking, didn't have an issue with the parking?
Yeah, through the chair, we were able to pull that data apart and essentially see where the link was. What, overall, our impression of these two slides, how they work together, is it's not a problem today, but it will become a problem as your community grows, your events grow, and your path of travel becomes more challenging. The vast majority of those that spoke to the somewhat important, or the extremely important or the very important, were those that were having challenges parking.
Right. Okay. Then my next question was further on, you mentioned that there was a bit more of a demand or request for teen youth or teen programming, and also some discussion about the cultural representation. And I wondered if you actually got some specific comments related to either of those.
We did. Going from memory, but I think we received about 160 comments. There wasn't a really strong response in the, add extra comments piece. One of those key themes were around teen programming, and there were specifics in there. Everything from, video game tournaments to, sports gatherings to those type to just teen gatherings. On the cultural side, there was some highlights of events that are happening in the community right now that we may not be, that may be at a place where we could incubate it and then grow them into the future. So there were some specifics on both of those. We'd be happy to share them for sure.
Yeah, that would be, I think having those more specific comments can be really great for our feedback and just understanding where everybody's sort of sitting with that. Anyway, thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you so much for putting this together. It's encouraging. Are you encouraged by the response rate? Did you think that was, it seems to me, pretty good
Yes,
response?
actually, thank you. Yeah, we weren't expecting that high of a feedback when we look at some other surveys that have happened that our communications folks and shared with us. So they were thinking we might get around between 50 and 100. So when we heard that, it was a little frustrating, but more blessing than our communications team just knocked it out of the park, and they were able to get us a lot of comments. So we were really happy with that.
Yeah, I think it's encouraging to see the numbers for sure, and probably gives a good representation of what's going on in our community. I appreciate the work that went into this for both the City of Beaumont and also for your organization to gathering this feedback, because I think it's very valuable for us in terms of long-term planning and short-term planning. At the same time, I'm really interested because I thought I heard you say, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I heard differently when Councillor Hyde spoke on the same question, but in questions 2, 3, and 4, you said it didn't really in your opinion, be reflective of the community. Just curious about that. Is that what I heard you say?
I can speak fairly specific. I think I was breaking down some elements. So what I would say is I think it is a reasonable representation of your community.
Okay.
There were some elements in each of those categories that were either overstated or perhaps understated. And so just to be really specific on question number 2, the youth population was understated. And so we didn't get as much. You have a very young under 15 population. And as you can see by the results, they represented kind of 3.5%. And so we didn't access the young voice perhaps as others were hoping to. But the rest of the buckets are essentially your community. In terms of the question around household income, part of our language on that was your average household income in the city is about $130,000 a year. And so we've got a fairly large bucket in here at $150,000 a year. And so just highlighted that those are folks that may have more disposable income, and some of the barriers from affordability might not be the same to attend events. And so, yes, it's representative. There was a couple elements within each of these slides that we just wanted to draw your attention to because they may have been overstating some of the positions.
Thanks for explaining that. Yeah. So, but at the same time, those you can kind of do a deep dive in some of those different areas, right? And have whole other surveys just in some of those areas. But overall, do you feel like it gave enough data to be able to, I mean, obviously you have some recommendations and things like that, but were you happy with the fact that you had a clear representation of the community?
Yeah, through the chair, I think this is an accurate reflection of your community, and I think maybe enhancing Amanda's point, a really great positive response. I mean, you have the opportunity to do this in many communities, and it's not always the most positive voices that lead in this case. I think you had some real positive feedback, and I would feel good about this if I was sitting in your chair. Doesn't mean that there's not opportunity, there always is, but if we did this in 25 other communities across Western Canada, I don't know that you would see the level of positivity that you are here, and I think that's a testament to the investment that you make as a city, but also the leadership that you have through other groups and your own.
Thank you so much. And I think it's also probably reflective of the fact that our city loves events and festivals.
They do.
I
They do.
think that's part of it too. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'll slide one in quickly, and then I'll move on to Councillor Penrod. Just looking to the actual comments, and thank you for the commitment to providing those. Was there any feedback directly from the groups you engaged, or some of the public comments around the rentable spaces, indoor and outdoor, and pricing and availability, or any of that? Was there any specifics on that?
To the chair, there was probably better feedback in the stakeholder sessions than we hosted. Although there was good public commentary, but the stakeholders would be the ones that deliver events in your community today. And so general sentiment was, we're really creative with using spaces that are not designed for festivals and public gatherings. And, between the city and our volunteer groups, we find a way to make it work. But as we get bigger, the strain on those spaces is growing. And it's coming with cost implications and organizational implications. And so part of the message that they certainly relayed to us was from a sustainability standpoint, recognizing that nobody has a whole bunch more money, that if the cost of converting these spaces can be minimized in any way. And so their feedback on that was things like, let's make sure we have washrooms and bleachers and, wireless access, and let's make sure that there's sound systems in places that we can just plug into versus bringing an independent one. Anything that we can do to reduce the conversion costs of those spaces for festivals and events would be money that they could spend on delivering the program versus converting the space. And so, yeah, there was I would say from a sustainability standpoint, not having purpose-built spaces have an impact, but not having the right amenities in those spaces to meet the current need was a challenge for them because they're renting everything.
Yeah, thank you for that commentary. Councillor Penrod.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Reid.
Thank you.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I got your name right. First question, how many times did Chief Melvin respond to the online survey? Do you want to cop to that, or?
He got his own session, actually.
I was impressed just reviewing your methodology at the public input that you got, but the dedication that you did, and I think this is a theme we're starting to see in our engagement processes, is that we're doing the both and, the very wide cast net for public, but then very targeted info gathering sessions, face-to-face meetings with user groups and kind of interested parties. So thank you for providing that. I'm guessing that the emphasis on the ERP that comes out loud and clear from your report isn't coming from the public per se, but from those vested interests. And I guess I wanted to highlight that or ask that question because it seems like it's maybe partially coming from your organization as kind of professional advice as you look across the sector of communities doing these events. So if you want to speak to that, I'd appreciate it.
Through the chair, so one of the things that we're really proud of within our firm is that we've all been in operations. And so, everybody in our firm has a background in running facilities and running events and, everything from Canada Day and your community to, FIFA Women's World Cup or the Garth Brooks concerts that were here, you name it, we've been in those spaces. And so we do have our lead on kind of the safety and event space. I would always ask the same question of, do you have an ERP? Do you have a chain of command? And what I would say is more often than not, we didn't. And so when we worked with stakeholder groups, to your comment, certainly from the stakeholders, less from the public. Although I will say the public is starting to recognize that not having the right amenities in some of your gathering spaces, parking, transportation, they're starting to use safety language around it. But I would say in our questioning of what tools should be there from a safety standpoint, there was a gap that I think creates real risk for not only you as the city, but also your public.
Thank you. Similar to questions that the mayor asked, just wanted to take advantage of having you here because you do this work in many communities, and so we try to learn from you more broadly. If you had the opportunity for follow-up, what question do you wish you had asked folks?
I think the question that we probably would have liked to ask folks is, what would you like to see? Like, I think we asked them what spaces, but I think in the eyes of the public, if you'd said, hey, give us, I don't know, pick the event, I think there was an appetite to say this is what we want to see. And I think people had a sense, you know, certainly the live music component comes up quite a bit. You know, people want to see a concert in their hometown. And so I would like to have been more specific with some of that, because I think it would be insightful. But, you know, they certainly said we like live events. It would have been nice to say, is that a live sporting event, a live cultural event, a live, you know, concert or an entertainment event? It's
Yeah.
probably a gap.
Thank you. And one more, if I might. Oh, that's, yeah, so similarly, I guess, and feel free to just say ditto if it covers off, but what response surprised you the most? And where maybe do council and administration have some follow-up work to do in between now, this what we heard, and the building out of the event and strategy?
Perhaps I can provide two comments, and Amanda can kick me if I'm offside, but we had one of your events right holders was talking about the application process for grants, and how important those grants were to their organization, and they're a youth-oriented organization, and they were going to buy they'd rented a U-Haul truck, they were going to buy popcorn that they were going to sell door to door to be able to raise the funds to deliver their event, because they felt that that was easier than the application process. And so if there was a piece that shocked me was, I have two young boys and I do a lot of fundraisers, and if I had to sell popcorn out of the back of a U-Haul for a weekend, that would be a terrifying endeavor. But they were quite clear that the process had opportunity within it, and that example was shocking to me. And one other element, and I think it's an opportunity, she's not kicking me, but most of the communities that we go to directly link an event to an economic impact. And so how much does this create an economic impact? Recognizing that you're a unique community in terms of you're not chasing, you know, heads and beds. But I will say, what do events do from an economic standpoint? I think it's a valuable measurement. In speaking with the team, you're in a unique place because you don't track it. Normally it's a destination marketing organization that would chase those things, but you know, these are economic drivers for a community, and I think as you continue to grow, you know, the link between large public gatherings and the economic spin-off is just important data to have.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. Appreciate it. I just have a quick question in terms of the engagement side of things. I know, I'm pretty confident I heard mention that the goal originally was about 362 participants, which is about 1.25, just above rate of participation based on our general population. Is that something that is considered good, like a 1% reach out?
Yeah, so we try to achieve a 95% reliability rating, and so there's a bit of an algorithm you plug it into based on your community size, and it spits out this is what you have to achieve to have a reliable survey result. And so 362 was the target number for reliability. We surpassed that. So what I will say is I actually think this would be a very comparable number to most of the communities that we would go to. And we were fairly worried when we were going into it, because normally we pair the kickoff of our engagement with some public event, and not having right now Beaumont was a gap in that, because normally we see kind of 25 or 30% of our results come from that kickoff event. So I think this is a good result, is probably the right way of saying it, and I do think it's an accurate, it should be 95% accurate if you ask your friends and neighbors.
Okay, perfect. And then just a question around, again, some of the questions that were asked, and the one you had mentioned that should have been asked. Just curious how we could see more attendance and participation at these events, because I don't imagine, as important as it is to have the ERP and more parking, if we said we doubled our parking and we have the best ERP, I don't imagine we'll double size or double the size of participants that would come to these events. So what would be something where we would see more participants come and more engagement in the community in these events based on the findings that you found?
Great question, actually. Part of it is you're going to see growth by virtue of your community growing at a pace that is leading in the province in some ways. Ultimately, I think it comes down to you're also part of a large metro region that has access to some of the best entertainment that exists in the country. And so the truth of the matter is, the more that you can spend to put on stage, the more people will come out. And I think that's probably the best way of saying it is, the more that you spend on the delivery of your events, the more people will come out, and they will constantly measure it against experiences that they have in Edmonton or Calgary, because that's where they travel to. And so it's going to come down to the level of quality you can deliver in your events, and how you can create an experience that is the same as your market competitors, within reason, obviously, but the more you invest in your events, the more people you'll have come out.
Okay, perfect. So I'll leave that to administration, see if we could get a Bruno Mars or something here. Is that the recommendation? And then just one last question, just in terms, sorry? Perfect. Yeah, just a question in terms of folks that may have answered the survey, parking being a big concern. Could that also have been residents that are maybe living in that area and then affected by some of the traffic that's coming in?
Through the chair, 100% it was. Some of the loudest voices within that were folks that are frustrated by parking and their daily lives being impacted by a festival. The other side to it is, it was really interesting in the commentary, because they were like, we love the fact that we can listen to this in our back deck, but we hate the parking challenges. And so there was a positive, but also, we don't like people parking all over our neighborhood. So definitely it was those impacted in the surrounding neighborhoods.
Perfect. Thank you for the info.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you for coming in tonight. I see no more requests to speak from council here tonight, and well-prepared, well-delivered, and well-attended survey. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Yeah.
You've got a wonderful event world.
Right on. Okay, that brings us to item 5.2 this evening, the fire bylaw. And I believe we have Director Melvin on hand, and over to you. Just getting organized here for those at home.
Thank you, guys. The fire service bylaw. So before we go into the presentation, obviously the City of Bowman has undertaken a thorough examination and revision of its bylaws concerning community safety with the goal of modernization, ensuring clarity and consistency in the language, and streamlining enforcement measures. Now, for some of you, you remember since 2022, we have added, amended, and repealed bylaws relating to community standards, traffic safety, emergency management, and responsible pet ownership. This bylaw is really the last one of the protective services portfolio. So the city's fire bylaw has been in effect since 2013, and it is the next community safety bylaw ongoing in an in-depth review and renewal process. The review of the city's fire bylaw was prompted by a need to align the bylaw with the evolution of the city's fire services and community expectations when it comes to fire safety. This review seeks to clarify responsibilities and enhance effectiveness of the existing bylaw while also encouraging fire safety within the community. Administration has reviewed similar bylaws from other municipalities, ensured alignment with the city's other bylaws, and confirmed that the scope of the bylaw remains within the municipal authority through a legal review. A draft of the proposed fire bylaw is in your attachments, set out in Attachment 1. Further, Attachment 2 provides a summary of changes between the current bylaw and the proposed bylaw for ease of reference. Some of the things in the rationale, obviously we stated that we need to modernize the bylaw, improve some of the clarity, transition to a new template. The old bylaw still said town of Beaumont. Obviously, we've updated the enforcement sections and designations, and we have expanded the fine schedule, which you'll find at the end of the draft bylaw. We've also removed some of the procedural pieces when it comes to just provided some clarity around fire and the prevention programs that we currently offer and what our policy is. Some of the city investigation things and permit application process for fire pits, other things when it comes to fireworks, things in the community. And we've also compared this to other regional standards. Some of the bylaw highlights that we'll touch in here in the presentation is reducing false alarms threshold from 3 to 2. Since 2013 and up until this year, many folks have residential security systems in their house that has either fire detectors or some type of fire system designed to it. Very sensitive depending on who placed it, how old it is. And we just want to provide a little bit more clarity so we can prevent those false alarms, prevent our volunteers from rushing to the station and getting in an emergency vehicle and trying to get to the scene as quickly as possible for a false alarm. So requirement to report fire alarm testing. So that's when any of our commercial buildings are doing any type of fire alarm testing for their facilities. It also could include if somebody's getting a private security system that has fire alarm capability in it, just to making sure that they're aware. So once again, we're just trying to prevent any of the risk to our members coming to the station, and obviously any risk to the public if we're responding to a false alarm. We've also had some clarity on owner liability for offense, especially when we have rental properties. So does the building owner. So dealing with false alarms, discharging of fireworks. We added some language and some fines around prohibit fireworks and firecrackers during a fire ban. And obviously removing snow removal around a fire hydrant within 48 hours of snowfall. Pretty much tied that the same way as we do for sidewalks. Just provides us better access. We've expanded, provided some clarifying usage on portable appliances. So anything from propane gas fire bowls, things that we've seen in the community. Some fire permit expectations. This also includes any of our areas that are in the agricultural area of the city and any of our city parks and rec sites. We've added some language on outdoor fireplaces. These will be different from fire pits. Your fire pit is a typical one in the ground. It's got your block around it with your grating on top. We're now starting to see kind of fire places built on the outside with designs and things like that. So we've added some language in on that. Incident reporting requirements, hazardous substance. So this is a case where a vehicle is parked on the roadway, either has a hydraulic leak or has a fuel leak. It's a duty to report those and not just let it soak into the asphalt, and hopefully it'll dry up. And then also some property damage, injury, and death. We have some perimeters to report to the GOA when it comes to fire damage for fire reporting, obviously investigation, and a duty to report when we have a fatality related from a fire offense. Fire department building and access and lock boxes. So this is really tied to commercial buildings that have a fire detection system within the building. They are provided a lockbox, and we have access to the building through the lockbox. The access is within the fire service. No one else has access to the box. Some transition appointed by bylaw authority from the fire chief to the CEO, and some uncollected fire service fees recoverable through taxes. So this is to ensure that if we have anything that needs to be collected, it can go through the tax process and be levied against the property. Kind of the next steps when it comes to this bylaw is now is the opportunity to ask and address any questions or clarification at this proposed bylaw and receive any additional feedback. If the committee is generally satisfied with the proposed bylaw, administration will bring back the usual process and place the proposed bylaw on the next available council agenda for consideration. So if there's anything that you want changed or you need clarifying, we would get that information tonight. We would make the changes and bring it back to do readings of that present bylaw. The review and update of the bylaw has been addressed through the approved operating budget. Ensuring that the city's bylaws are periodically reviewed and updated helps to limit the city's liability and ensures that the city has the authority required to provide effective governance and stewardship of resources. There was no public consultation as part of this update. A communication plan is being developed to inform residents and updated regulations, which would include all our permits being updated and obviously the website being updated also. So that is all in the works right now. And that concludes the presentation. I'll now open it up to the committee for any questions that they may have on the proposed changes to the current bylaw.
Very good. Thank you very much. I see the board is.
I'm first. Wow, first on the draw. Thank you so much, short and sweet. I did get a chance to look through, and I'm just looking at just a few things in this summary document that I had some questions about. You mentioned on your slide presentation there about, if someone has has a fine that they haven't paid, that you can always put it towards their taxes. Does that also apply to businesses? Like if there's a fine for, you mentioned about false alarms and things like that, and if a commercial space, like is there anything in the bylaw that deals with that aspect?
Through the deputy mayor to the mayor, that includes both business and residential.
Okay. So it's implicit in there, or it's just spelled out in a different way? I didn't see it in there. You just said it against the land tax, so.
We can add some clarity in there, but the intent of the bylaw is that it goes to whoever is the registered on the tax roll, whoever business that is or whoever owns that property.
Okay, maybe it might be helpful to put in there specifically for commercial or business, that it goes towards the business owner or something like that, so it's clear, because otherwise it wasn't clear when I read it. So just feedback. The other thing is, I'm assuming there's definitions of what are prohibited material or portable appliances and things like that. Is that clear in the bylaw as well?
Through the committee chair to the mayor, all that would be in part 1 of the bylaw. Okay. In attachment 1, part 1 deals with definitions, purpose, and interpretation.
Okay. And then along the lines of portable appliances, there's a place here that says no person should use a portable appliance inside any combustible building or structure, including detached garages and sheds. Does that also apply to like apartment balconies, or is that a separate entity in and of itself in terms of the building?
Typically, through the committee chair to the mayor, typically they're not permitted on balconies. We would allow, depending on, once again, their lease agreement, we would have a discussion with that, but that would all be included in our part of our emergency response plan for said facilities. But typically you wouldn't see a portable appliance like a fire bowl being permitted on a balcony. There's too much risk.
Okay. Is that something that would be helpful as well to put into this document?
We can definitely add a clause in there that for any of those high density or mixed density locations, just provide some clarity.
Okay, good. And then the last question I have, and maybe this is the question you're going to ask to Councillor Hyde. In regards to talking about the use of fireworks, and in the fines section, and I think I can't find it right now, but also in the top one, it talks about setting out, discharging fireworks during a fire ban, and then also just in mixed use, or just in general. But in between those two things, there's a bunch of other lines, and I'm wondering if on the document they can be side by side. My thinking is if someone goes and looks at a document and says, oh, okay, we can't discharge fireworks during a fire ban, and that's all that it is said in that category, whereas down below there's another one that says you can't actually discharge fireworks if you're not licensed. So I'm just from thinking, would that be helpful to put those two together?
Through the chair to the mayor, we can definitely make that alignment and make sure that certain areas are keyed together and make sure they relate back in sequence back to the bylaws. So
Yeah, I think.
that's just a formatting thing we can easily change if it.
Okay, and yeah, in the fine section as well, I would say just, again, human thinking, sometimes we just don't read the rest if we think that's all that's on that category. So those are just my thoughts and feedback. Thank you.
Councillor Hyde, you're next. I'm just going to slide one in that kind of dovetails off of the mayor, and that would be around fire table type things. And I believe in your presentation you alluded to that, but increasingly there's more use of fire table type things built into backyards and decks and patios and such. And I'm just wondering, for clarity, if those are permittable or a permitted item when they are fixed in place versus those that would be portable.
For the chair, we would include those as a portable, but based on the permitting request, if somebody came in and said, hey, it's going to be stationary, this is where it's going to fix, we would look at all the combustible material around that and determine if it's safe to put the fire table there. Typically, I've seen fire tables in and around lawn furniture, but we would look at every opportunity. A lot of this is coming out of cooking and portable appliances being put in sheds, which has recently caused a structure fire that we've had. So it's just providing some education around what's permitted, what's portable, and we're able to work with anyone, but really it's depending on what's around the fire table.
Okay, that's fair. Councillor Hyde.
Yeah, thank you very much. And the mayor asked the same question I did. A lot of times people don't read an entire document. Oh, wow, can you believe that? No, but they don't actually read the entire bylaw. They just kind of find, oh, fire's fine with a fire ban. There's no fire ban right out. Throw stuff out. The one that I had that was sticking out for me was the transition to the CEO from the fire chief for the bylaw authority. We've looked at this in another council meeting, but this one specifically, I'm just wondering why we would transition that over to the CEO from the fire chief on this bylaw specifically around fire. He'll put you on.
Apologies. Thank you for the question through the chair to Councillor Hyde. So under the MGA, the Municipal Government Act, the act essentially sets up a one employee model for municipalities, and that's generally how all municipalities must function. So for bylaws, it is standard practice, not just for this bylaw only, but for all bylaws to essentially have the CEO accountable to council.
Okay, so yeah, it's through the MGA Act, sort of an idea. I was just trying to wrap my head around the fire part of it and how that would work back to the chief from the CEO. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate it.
Right on. With that, we'll move over to Councillor Murray. Oh.
Sorry, thank you. I could just provide a little bit more clarity for Councillor Hyde. So as the CIO is the only employee of council, council can only direct the CIO. The CIO would then delegate other authority to employees to carry out the tasks. Okay.
Thank you for that supplemental. Councillor Murray.
That came up fast. My question was in regards to also the fireworks area. Boy, right, section 37, it talks about presumed permitted when fireworks are discharged on lands belonging, I might not have done this exactly in the technical wording that was written there, but it sounds as though it's permitted on private property, but in section 39, it says that we do not permit fireworks. So I just wanted a little bit of clarity. They sound like they oppose each other in the way that it's worded.
Through the committee chair to Councillor Murray, if I can provide some clarity when it comes to the fireworks, you can, if the fireworks are a permitted piece on owner's land, they have to go through the permitting process through the CAO. So Canada Day fireworks, we want to hold it at Four Seasons. There's a permitting process where the owner of the land, there needs to be something captured in the bylaw that states that. 39 deals with any commercial selling of fireworks within the city. So anything like your convenience stores, not permitted to sell fireworks. If you go to other areas of the province, you may see a bank of fireworks being sold in a convenience store. This just prohibits the selling of that fireworks. So,
thank you. I realize now that 39 was not exactly the way that I had read it in my head. Is there a way that we can clarify the wording in number 37? Because potentially I could have a pyrotechnic license. Would then I be able to get a permit and put fireworks off in my yard?
Through the committee chair to Councillor Murray, if you were within the city of Beaumont, you wouldn't have the follow distance to be permitted to fire off fireworks in your yard. Obviously, that's the reason why that's in here. So a lot of this is timed to commercial fireworks events, and we're trying to eliminate individuals permitting fireworks and firing it off in their have a permit. As part of that permit process, there's so much distance on fallout on how far big of a space that you would need. We wouldn't have any areas. We'd be very restricted. We may have one or two areas in the current built-up areas within the city. We may have areas in outside in the agricultural district, but once again, that would depend on fuel load. So it's just not based on, or the city would sign off and go, yes, we think this is a good idea.
Right. So I just find that the wording in this is maybe a little unclear, and maybe we could relate it wording.
We can take that back for consideration. I'll leave that in the hands of our LLS staff
to get the right wording for you.
To get the right wording, but I think we know the.
Yeah, I think that kind of captures everything because a few other questions have been answered. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And number 37 was up there, and the wording on that says, no person or owner shall discharge or permit the discharge of any fireworks within the city. And the part that I stumbled on was actually the comma. It feels like there should be like a period there. So it's like that statement that you're not doing it in Beaumont. Because Councillor Murray, I stumbled around and had to read that whole thing a couple times as well. So good point out with that. Councillor Colesmith, over to yourself.
Thank you. I'm just going to jump back into that 37 one more time, please. When I read it, I understood no person or owner shall permit the discharge of fireworks. And then I read the second bit as saying fireworks discharged from lands belonging to an owner. Basically, we're saying that owner is assumed to have allowed it. Maybe permitted wasn't the right choice. And this was for identifying who to give the
Chair to Councillor Colesmith. Yes, the intent here is to prevent somebody going on to our agricultural lands or firing it from the city over to there and let the fallout happen. That's what we're trying to prevent. But we can take the information back and we can provide a little bit more clarity on what exactly the intent of 37 is.
Okay, fair enough. I was going to say if the intent were to identify, so that might have some unintended consequences too. So I think, yeah, that have some unintended consequences too. So I think, yeah, that paragraph needs some revision. I've got a whole bunch here, so I'll only ask one or two, and then I'll pass it on to the others before we come, and then I'll pass it on to the others before we come back. Starting at the beginning, in the definitions, prohibited materials, it's got a definition and lists a bunch of items. One of them is oddly specific, and I was hoping you could provide some detail. It says, solid waste from sawmills or planing mills with an annual production in excess of 6,500 cubic meters of lumber. I guess from a practical standpoint, how would you ever know, like, the source of, like, the mill and their production? And, like, obviously there was an intent behind that. I was just curious what it might be.
Through the committee chair to Councillor Cole-Smith, yeah, we can easily remove that one. Be very hard for me to go out and determine 6,499 cubic meters of lumber. We can easily remove that. I think the other items can capture what the intent is.
Okay, thank you. And then section 16 and 17 that talk about false alarms. 16 says that where there are more than 2 false alarms within a 6-month period, they may be liable for a fine. And then 17 says if the source of a false alarm can't be determined, so you had a false alarm, you will get a fine. So I just thought, do those two maybe work against each other, or is there intent behind what appears to be repetition there?
Through the committee chair to Councillor Cole-Smith, the second one is really dealing with commercial buildings where we've had false alarm. I have no idea. If we let them know that may be liable for a fine, then they'll bring in a technician to get it fixed. Because they just may say, well, I've only had one in the past 6 months, but if we get one every 6 months, they don't fix the problem. So the intent here is that if you don't know what caused the alarm, you may get a fine. So here's your education to get it remedied and get it fixed.
Okay, fair enough. And then section 32, the no person shall use a portable appliance inside, and it lists a bunch of structures. Portable appliance seems to include everything from fire tables to barbecues to portable heat. Will this have any unintended consequences on, like, say, construction heat for new builds? I know often they're looking for that, and as the mayor mentioned, you know, barbecues and apartments.
Through committee chair to Councillor Cole-Smith, this wouldn't affect buildings that are under construction, nor would it be somebody who has a gas heater in their garage, a permanent installation and not a portable appliance. The intent here, once again, is try to prevent the small garden sheds, the issues that we've had where people are cooking within the last 12 to 18 months. So we're just trying to provide some language around that. We can provide more clarity if you deem warranted. We can add something in there for sure, partaking when it comes to homes that are under major construction or renovations.
Yeah, just looking at the definitions and what. Thank you. Thank you. I'll pass it on and come back later if I may.
Councillor Natalabos.
Perfect. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. First off, thank you for this. I think there's a lot of good changes in here that are required. Maybe some wording needs adjustment as discussed, but it definitely saved me emotion, especially when it comes to fireworks here. I do have a question, though, for secondary fines. I can't seem to locate any for fireworks. Is there one that exists for secondary offense?
Through the chair to Councillor Natellenboss, we've increased the fine drastically from what it was permitted before. we are hoping that it would only be a one offense evaluation. We also have the ability under the fees and charges bylaw to charge them a response fee in accordance with the Alberta transportation rates. So there's an additional piece that could be added. But if you would like a secondary offense, we can easily add that to the table.
Okay, perfect. And then I guess just a question in terms of a simple change like that to administration, how would you prefer we go about that? Can that just be a conversation here, or does that require a motion down the road?
Thank you through to Councillor Natellenbos. Just as we're at Committee of the Whole, this is just to get Council's feedback. We'll bring back the final bylaw for second and third reading, which Council can debate at that time.
Perfect. Thank you. And then, yes, just another comment, another good add was the fail to adhere to the supervision or extinguishing a fire. So just another positive that sometimes isn't always captured. In terms of education, once this is obviously implemented and approved, especially on some of the concerning things like not putting out your fire, the fireworks, the ones that can cause big issues and significant fires. Are we going to have some sort of a campaign to educate individuals that there's now fines associated with it, but more importantly, the danger that comes with some of those activities?
Through the chair to Councillor Natellenbos, yes, we are working on our communications plan right now. Once we figure out what the final document looks like, all of our website stuff will be updated. Communications will roll out a comms plan, what that looks like for social media and other avenues where we can be able to talk about it. We're also looking at having some information available when we do Beaumont Days and we do the pancake breakfast. Perfect time to have some information there for folks just to get that information. So we'll use and we'll exhaust every opportunity we have through our current communications department to try to get the message out as clearly as possible.
Perfect. Thank you.
I'm going to slide a couple in here, and then we'll move on to Councillor Penrod. This is less conducive to a bylaw, but maybe there's a place to put it in. Bylaws often like this state what you can and can't do, and if you do or do not, then you refer to Schedule A where there's the fines. How would we incorporate, and maybe this is an education piece, how would we incorporate the courteous use of fires? On a summer night when you have a permitted, you just because you can doesn't mean you should, I guess is where I'm going with that. There's often also a couple of known backyard debris burners, and sometimes that is wet and it generates excessive smoke that I'm surprised people don't call in a house fire on sometimes, because there's just excessive smoke coming out of a couple of yards from an approved fire pit. What would you say to that, and how is this the right venue, or do we have to think of something else to bring something like that education piece to life?
For the chair, I can fully understand how important it is for folks to have a backyard fire pit. I think it creates a sense for many folks that they've been used to ever since they were a child to have some type of fire. It's not something foreign to folks. We've really tried over the last several years is educating the public on what's burnable debris and what's not. Like, don't be going and burning wet leaves. That creates a whole bunch of smoke. But we also understand that there is some problem areas somewhere in the community, and we would encourage folks to do that. So that'll all be part of our communications plan. Like, if there's an issue, you got to let us know. We can investigate and we can educate that person. Maybe they just don't know. They're new to Beaumont, they're new to Alberta, they're not familiar. All they've known is, hey, I can just have this fire in the backyard. But we do know based on conditions, we're hopefully that providing enough education that they will determine, like, hey, you know what, the winds are pretty high tonight. This is not a good idea for me to burn my yard and my fence down in my neighbor's backyard. It's probably not a good idea. So we'll have education throughout the year when it comes to when, in theory, camping season starts, and very similar to what the province puts out when it comes to fire safety from the Office of Fire Commissioner and also from Alberta Parks. So this is just not going to stop with this bylaw. It's a lengthy fire prevention campaign that we have yearly that will bring up certain areas, and as new areas comes up or new problems come up, we'll address those as we see fit.
Thank you. And the secondary piece I have to that is some of the yards and homes that are being created right now cannot physically have a fire pit in them due to measurements. How do we more upfront in the build design process highlight that for folks? I've seen recent frustration in the kind of the fall last year that I can't even have a fire pit in my backyard. Well, that's right, you can't. There are measurements and the backyard is physically not big enough to have that. Where might the opportunity be sooner than the identification of a problem or someone just putting a pit back there? What can we look at or think about?
For the chair, I believe a lot of that stuff may start with the development permit for the builders that they're aware of what are the requirements within the fire bylaw and put some obligation on the builders. I would agree that a homeowner gets there, they're moving from an apartment, now they're into their own house, and oops, now my place is too small, or I have too many trees, or my deck is too close. So we deal with those on a case by case, but ultimately we provide the information. Sometimes it's buyer beware and making sure you're fully aware of all the rules. But there's nothing saying that once this bylaw gets passed, that that's not shared with our planning and development folks and fan it out to all the builders and developers. Like the new fire bylaws here, make sure you're aware of some of these highlights when you're building your homes and you're saying things that may not be true. We could easily include that part of our comms plan as this thing gets rolled out. So,
yeah, I think that would be advisable and appreciated. So, thank you, Councillor Penrod. Over to you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll just add my name to the list of support for a rework on Section 37, and I was glad to hear someone else raise too. Like, I had a concern about people stopping too early in the bylaw and missing that, nope, actually fireworks aren't permitted at all. Maybe a question that I could use to shed some more clarity on what's being contemplated in Section 37 and especially in Section 38. You know, one of the pinch points for fireworks in our community is around Diwali and that kind of cultural works. And I understand that's a challenge globally. So it's not just here in Beaumont. But watching the fallout of that on social media with my popcorn, one of the actual helpful and interesting ideas that came forward, and I just wondered if it got on administration's radar, was a member of the association community saying, you know, maybe it's time we actually get together and sponsor a community event and have a public display because this is not something that's permitted and it's causing trouble. Is that something that hit your radar at all? And is that part of what's being contemplated here by permitting, or were we just talking Canada Day? And
through the chair to Councillor Penrod, that's the exact intent when we wrote this part of the bylaw, is that as we have a larger population, this can turn into a community event. And if you want to hold a community event, like the city holds community events, there's a process to go through. It's a lot more controlled. We will look at all the parameters on that permit to make sure we have the fallout, so we don't get people firing it in their backyards, catching their neighbor's stuff on fire, and causing a big civil issue in the community. It's not saying no, it's just providing, okay, this is, if you want to do this, this is the proper way of doing it safely, and this is what's the intent of the bylaw and how it was written. So we're hoping that as part of that people will look like that and say, this is an excellent opportunity to bring a different culture to the community, and hopefully that comes to fruition. So that was the reason why the intent was there.
yeah, I think that responsiveness will be much appreciated if and when these changes pass. Another question just for Chief Mel. It's specified that sparklers are not included in kind of the definitions of fireworks and things like that. And that makes sense with respect to like somebody using a sparkler on a cake, but just wondering, I know in the news over New Year's, there was a big fire, I think it was in Switzerland, and it was in the end caused by people putting a bunch of sparklers together that then set the structure on fire. So just wondering if, like operationally or from a fire hazard perspective, what's the difference between the two?
Through the chair to Councillor Penrod, sparklers was not there because it's not in the Explosives Act as a pure definition of considering what fireworks says. We would hope that we wouldn't have to address the issues of multiple sparklers. We're trying to provide some leeway and not being so constrictive that you can't do anything in the community. But we're just trying to, when we look at all the risks, presently right now, that's a low risk for us. It will always be a risk depending on how many you put together, but we will deal with those cases on a case-by-case basis if they do come to fruition.
Yeah, I appreciate that restraint that you've just spoken to. I think the community appreciates it too. You know, a theme in the last few months has been like, let's enforce the bylaws that we do have. But we don't want to go so far down that road that we're, you know, everybody's looking over their shoulders wondering when they're going to get their next ticket or whatever. That's not the spirit of these things. But when we've gone through the process and used a lot of restraint and decided that these are the things that are permitted and these are the things that are not permitted, then I think it's not unfair to expect that we would enforce those rules. That takes me to, on page 74, one of the last things proposed is the designation of, and maybe I misunderstood, but I took this as a new piece, but the designation of firefighters as designated officers of the municipality. And the question is, does that extend to all of our fire service or just the full-time permanent people, or does that include all the volunteers as well? It's page 74 of the document.
Through the chair to Councillor Penrod, this is provided to the firefighter, so could be part-time, could be casual, could be full-time, because many of the paid on-call volunteers are responding after hours. There may not be any full-time staff around, so that's why that provision's in there.
Okay, thank you. And it just applies, as I understand it, it just applies in general blanket and all the time, or is it more?
Through the chair to Councillor Penrod, it would apply particularly within this bylaw and for the fire service when they're responding. We would have no anticipation for somebody outside the role as a firefighter to do any designated officer stuff, as in the conduct of their duties as passed down and they're trained for. So,
appreciate it. And one more question, if I might, Chair. This just shifting gears to hydrants. In Part 2, Section 5, one of the first provisions is that no person other than a firefighter or employee of the city shall affix any tool, blah, blah, blah. This is my opportunity to just understand part of the process that exists in Beaumont a little better. I understand that there's relatively few fire hydrants within the city limits that are the responsibility of residents of Bearland condominium associations. Can you advise council what's the operating procedure for those residents when they need to have their, I understand they need to have their hydrants serviced on an annual basis or something to that effect? How do they go about doing that?
Through the chair to Councillor Penrod, are you talking about private hydrants compared to city-owned?
I'm honestly not 100% sure how they're classified. I was hoping you could advise me on that.
So within the city, we do have city-owned infrastructure, and we do have private hydrants that are on private property. A lot of times you'll see those in large commercial areas. There is some provisions underneath the National Fire Code for the Alberta edition that deals with private hydrants and what the responsibility is. A lot of times we've had discussions with property owners about private hydrants. There's still some more work to do on it, but we do have all the information and ability to communicate that with our commercial landowners. But majority of the hydrants that are on the residential area are all city-owned assets, and our waste and water folks look after those.
Okay, and just as a concrete example, so a condominium association like what's located on Chateau Close, south of the Lions RV Park, would that, in your terminology, is that a private hydrant? I think there's one or two in there.
Through the chair to Councillor Penrod, I'd have to look at the water distribution map to determine if that was private. If there was questions, then I would encourage that condominium association and any others that have private hydrants to reach out to our fire prevention folks, and we can provide them all the information to determine if it's private, if it's city, and what the responsibilities are.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you for the questions there. And it looks like there's 3 folks up. I've got the mayor, Councillor Murray, and then Councillor Colesmith. And just if everyone could keep their comments fairly high level. We've done a bunch of wordsmithing and asked questions and such tonight, but if there's a number that needs input, maybe let's highlight that, leave it with administration, and then they'll be able to bring that back next. So, Mayor, we'll start. CAO?
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate your comments because that was a very good suggestion. We've received a lot of feedback tonight, a lot of questions, and we will be able to pull that into a rewrite of the bylaw and bring it back for debate at a regular council meeting. So thanks for that, Stephen.
Yeah, and I think that like number 37, important clarity on that, and it's some really good feedback tonight. Mayor, over to yourself.
Thank you. Just a few, purely out of curiosity, but maybe it's something to consider. In the fines section, we have some new, I'm assuming these are new fines, like paint a fire hydrant. I'm curious, how much does it cost to paint a fire hydrant? And if $250 covers it?
Through the chair to the mayor, I think I could paint it for under $250.
I'm assuming the paint is going to be like a special paint or something, right?
Yeah, we typically don't have issues with this. We put this in there as a precautionary to make sure that somebody says, well, if I paint a fire hydrant and it looks like whatever because I want it doesn't match with my house decor, that's what the fine is there. But we can reach out to our waste and water folks, and if then we can adjust the numbers as accordingly. So,
thank you for that. Yeah, and the other one, well, you know, some of these might be 11, damaged city equipment, vehicle, infrastructure, property. Again, $500 seems really low for depending on the significance of the damage. And I'm wondering if you need to put almost like a scale in there depending on the damage.
Through the chair to the mayor, this is a fine. That's notwithstanding what the insurance cost recovery would be between the city's insurance and whoever drove over the fire hydrant or knocked down a tree or hit a vehicle. So this is the penalty that you get for the actions that you created, and then insurance folks get involved in.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, thank you.
Councillor Murray, you're up.
Thank you. A question, and I don't know if this is meant to be on purpose either, but in this document, we have a list of fines and offenses, but we actually haven't listed the price of obtaining a legal permit for a fire pit or, that sort of thing. And I'm wondering if that should be included in this document so that a person who is looking at this would be able to see, the comparison. I could have an illegal fire and get fined, or I could have a $50 permit fee.
Through to Councillor Murray. So we don't put the application fees into each individual bylaw that might have an application to it. All of those are handled in the fees and charges bylaw. So that's where you would find your application fees for any type of application that you're looking for the city.
So we don't think that it would be a good idea to have it in here?
No, it's
Just
always stated in the
because
fees and
we want to
charges.
be able to track it and make sure that it's updated, or what's the reason for that?
So the reason for having it in the fees and charges bylaws, that's the one bylaw that you go to for all the fees and charges that the city will charge. If we start putting them in all the individual bylaws, then we have to bring back a multitude of bylaws to change if those fees and charges change.
Okay, okay. Is there a season for fire permits? You know, in the Maritimes, they won't allow you to have fire pits outside until a certain month.
Through the chair to Councillor Murray. Before we issue any type of fire permit, there's a lot of factors come in. We'll see a lot of things come in May when we're talking about what the weather looks like, relative humidity, what the winds are looking like. So just because you're able to get a fire permit may not permit you to get a fire permit because there's other circumstances that taken in. It's just not a, I want a permit, here you go. It's, yes, you have a permit. There's several conditions that are on that permit when it comes to wind speed. And we would typically, if the weather changes while we have a permit out, we will call the permit holder and say, cease permit. You'll see things that you've probably seen come out in the province where we're talking about fire restrictions. We're talking about fire advisories. We're talking about fire bans. A lot of those things are well known in Alberta. We would have a very similar structure here if it's getting too bad, where, you know what, sorry, you can't have your outside fire pit because it's too dry out. Give us a week till things green up, and then we release that. So there's several different levels that we would have when it comes to somebody being permitted to have a permit, more than I'm entitled to it, so I should get it.
So when somebody does get a permit, this is not, you know, a 5-year permit. It is one season or 1 year, or is that in here? Is this in the document?
So it's through the chair to Councillor Murray. So we will see things typically in our agricultural areas where I need to burn off some burn piles before the springtime comes. They'll get a fire permit for that. There'll be some conditions where if they have anything that may cause smoke to go across a highway, they would have to have highway signs. So there's several different rules when it comes to fire permitting. Typically, we don't issue fire permits within the city in the built-up areas, so you're not going to see one in a ZUR. We would say, no, remove the material, out you go. So if there's another avenue of getting rid of the debris that's reasonable, truck it away. It goes to a landfill that gets separated there. We would put that in the permit. From experience, a lot of rural areas will have a fire permitting process where somebody may need to burn a bush pile or some windrows or have a burn barrel. So we do have those areas within the city limits. So this is what this permit process is for.
Okay. So it would be different as well for any resident. I wasn't actually even considering somebody on agricultural lands, but okay, I think that answers my question. Thanks.
So just for some clarity, so the fire permit would be different than a fire pit permit. Somebody wants to put a fire pit in their backyard. This is fire permitting, or typically any type of what we considered in the bylaw open air fires, you know, type of bonfire. I need to burn off some debris because I'm cultivating my land or whatever it may be. So there has to be some provisions in that because we're just not solely 100% urban. We do have some agricultural lands that surround the city.
Okay.
Councillor Colesmith, over to yourself.
Thank you. Just a couple quick ones, I guess. Section 66, which talks about an order issued pursuant to this bylaw may be served. So in the case that an order is being served, and it lists a bunch of options here. How would this affect like a building site? You know, it talks about we could serve it to an individual who's over 18 or to the mailing address of the company. But if it's a, you know, say a construction site, does this perhaps,
Councillor Colesmith, this would be the same way we do for issuing unsightlies. Whoever the builder is, whoever's legally is tied to the property, we would do it the same way. But we specifically say if it's in a built-up area, if it's under development, who gets it? Is it a developer? Is it a builder? We can put those provisions in if you permit.
I guess when I don't want to say how to do it. I guess my question is, does this give us the adequate tools to do it? Or is this limiting us in any way?
Through the chair to Councillor Colesmith, I don't think it's eliminating us. We can definitely go back to our legal for a quick consult on this one, just to make sure that those things are covered.
Okay, fair enough, thanks. And then glad to hear there's a communication plan coming for the fireworks, and everything's in place. I saw the proposed increase to the fine has been raised, recognizing the risk that's there. Is there anything missing in this bylaw to allow us to enforce these rules? I know in the past we've given warnings. The problem persists. What's holding us back now, or is there anything?
Through the chair to Councillor Colesmith, once the bylaw gets updated and we have the language in there that provides easier enforcement, that is not going to be debated through the courts. I think what we've done with our research to update the language in there to most current, as information changes over the years, the bylaw will go through several revisions, just not 13 years. The plan is to every year, if there's something that comes up during the year that, hey, we've got to address this, then we'll definitely bring it back to council and say, hey, this is becoming an issue in our community. We need to address it either with a change of the fine structure, change to the language, or something's come out legally that, hey, we're not allowed to do it anymore, or, hey, we are allowed to do it. So we're constantly looking at this bylaw, and all the other bylaws that we currently have within protective services are under constant review to make sure that the bylaw officers and my staff have the ability to go out and enforce what's the intent of this bylaw, and that's around community safety when it comes to fires.
Perfect. So, yes, things will change, but as of right now, this gives us the tools. Okay, thank you.
Thank you to the committee for robust discussion on that one. I think my concluding comment on this and any other bylaw that is brought forward, and I really haven't stated this clearly before, but I really think we need to drive to have plain language rather than some of the legal type language that we do see in some of these bylaws. I know that there's an alignment that happens and such, but if we don't want something to happen, let's clearly state it. If there are options, let's clearly state them. I think that would be helpful and increase readability on that. But with that, I thank you for the presentation tonight and all the great answers that you have, and as per normal, on point and right off the top of your head, and you've got it all, and we appreciate that. That concludes that section 5.2. Looking forward to section 6.1. Clerk, do we have any new councillor inquiries for this evening?
No, we have nothing new this evening.
And any councillor inquiry responses to be presented?
No.
Okay. With that, I will call this meeting adjourned at musical clocks. How about 6:54 p.m.? Thank you.